In a quiet village, a 95-year-old woman named Madame Louise lives alone in her large mansion, a legacy of several generations. Widowed for 10 years, she spends her days contemplating the past, surrounded by memories of her late husband, whom she loved deeply. Louise has two sons, Jean, the oldest, who is loyal and devoted to his mother, and Pierre, the youngest, an ambitious man hungry for wealth. Jean has always been close to his mother, watching over her with love and respect. He visits her regularly, brings her provisions, and ensures that nothing is missing in her house. For Jean, his mother's legacy is above all a family symbol, a living memory that he wishes to preserve. Pierre, on the other hand, is impatient. Married to a woman just as greedy as him, he sees in his mother's inheritance an opportunity to get rich and live the lavish life he always dreamed of. Jean's presence and Louise's love for him represent an obstacle to his ambitions for Pierre. He then begins to develop a devious plan to get rid of his mother and thus take over the entire family fortune. One day, Jean receives an exceptional offer from his company for an important project in New York, which would require him to go there for 2 months. Hesitant to leave his mother alone, he consults Louise. She, although touched by her son's attention, encourages him to seize this opportunity. "I'm fine, darling.
Don't worry about me.
Leave and come back quickly." Jean therefore leaves for New York, reassured to know that Pierre will be there to watch over their mother in his absence. However, as soon as Jean gets on the plane, Pierre sees a golden opportunity to put his plan into action. Without the watchful presence of his brother, he finally feels free to manipulate Louise as he pleases. Shortly after Jean leaves, Pierre begins to visit Louise more frequently, playing the role of the caring son. He brings her gifts, organizes outings for her, and is charming, thus creating a false image of devotion. During these times spent with her, Pierre subtly introduces the idea of selling the mansion and other properties under the pretext of simplifying his life. He explains to her that it would be more practical for her to live in a smaller residence, or even a luxurious retirement home, where she could be surrounded by people her own age and receive appropriate care. Louise, although weakened by age, remains suspicious. She listens attentively to her son, but is not easily convinced. She knows that Jean would never agree with these ideas. However, Pierre persists, using more insidious arguments such as security, peace of mind, and the difficulty of maintaining such a large mansion in good condition. He even goes so far as to bring in a real estate agent under false pretenses to assess the value of Louise's property. She, taken by surprise and increasingly tired by Pierre's incessant solicitations, begins to doubt. Pierre pushes her to sign documents to simplify certain formalities, but Louise, always lucid, asks to read each paper in detail. As the weeks pass, Louise feels her strength declining, and Jean's absence is cruelly felt. She tries to contact him, but Pierre, claiming communication problems or that Jean is too busy, intercepts the calls and letters. Alone, isolated, and pressed on all sides, Louise begins to wonder if she should not give in to Pierre, especially as he becomes more and more insistent and impatient. Pierre, frustrated by his mother's obstinacy and the imminence of Jean's return, begins to lose patience. Feeling that time is running out and that his mother will not easily give in to his attempts at manipulation, he decides to move on to more radical means. One evening, while having dinner with Louise, Pierre carefully observes the medications she must take daily for various health problems related to her age. A sinister idea germinates in his mind. He could modify the doses or exchange some of the drugs to gradually weaken his mother, making her more vulnerable and docile, or even cause an accident that would seem natural. The next day, Pierre sets to work. He begins by obtaining substances similar to some of Louise's medications, but with devastating side effects when administered incorrectly. Discreetly, he exchanges the pills in the boxes, knowing that Louise, because of her confidence in him and her well-established routine, will not notice anything unusual. At first, the changes are subtle. Louise begins to feel dizzy, nauseated, and unusual fatigue. She puts these symptoms down to age and stress caused by recent tensions with Pierre. But very quickly, the effects become more serious. Louise sometimes loses her train of thought, struggles to concentrate, and even begins to doubt her own memory. Pierre, feigning concern, plays the role of the caring son, while encouraging her to stay in bed and rest, knowing that this will only make her situation worse. Pierre continues his macabre game for several days, hoping that Louise will finally give in and sign the sales documents out of confusion. However, Louise, despite her weakened state, remains internally resistant. A survival instinct, coupled with a growing distrust of Pierre, pushes her to refuse to sign anything, even if she struggles to remember why. One day, when Louise is particularly weak and disoriented, she receives an unexpected visit from a longtime friend, Madame Dupuis, came to bring him some comfort. Madame Dupuis, a perceptive woman, immediately notices the alarming change in Louise's condition. She questions Pierre about his mother's health, but his evasive answers and his insistence that Louise rest arouse her suspicions. Louise, in a moment of lucidity, confides to Madame Dupuis her worries. She talks about the dizziness, her confusion, and above all her growing feeling that something is wrong. Madame Dupuis, alarmed, decides to act discreetly. She suggests that Pierre bring in a doctor for a routine checkup, but Pierre, fearing that his plan will be discovered, tries to brush her off by pretending that everything is under control. Determined to protect her friend, Madame Dupuis takes advantage of a moment when Pierre is absent to go get medicine at the pharmacy. She takes the opportunity to inspect Louise's medications. She then discovers the exchange of pills and, horrified, understands what is happening. Madame Dupuis, shocked by her discovery, realizes the urgency of the situation. She knows that time is running out and that her friend's life is in danger. However, she also understands that acting hastily could alert Pierre and give him the opportunity to conceal his actions. He needs a subtle plan to save Louise without attracting attention. Taking advantage of Pierre's temporary absence, Madame Dupuis discreetly exchanges the manipulated pills with Louise's real medications, which she finds while rummaging in the bedroom drawers. Then, she gently encourages Louise to take her medication, while assuring her that everything will be fine. Madame Dupuis stays close to Louise, speaking to her with tenderness and trying to maintain her lucidity as much as possible. When Pierre returns, he notices that something seems different, but he has no idea that Madame Dupuis has discovered his secret. He continues to play the role of the caring son, offering his mother false concern while planning to take her to a nursing home the very next day. However, Madame Dupuis has no intention of letting Pierre carry out his plan. As soon as she leaves the mansion, she discreetly contacts Jean in New York. In an urgent phone call, she tells him everything she has discovered, insisting that he must return immediately to save his mother. Jean, horrified by what he hears, books a flight to France as soon as possible. He promises to put an end to Pierre's shenanigans and protect their mother at all costs. Meanwhile, Madame Dupuis does not remain inactive. She goes to Louise's family doctor and explains the situation in detail. The doctor, alarmed, decides to immediately go to the mansion to examine Louise, pretending that it is just a routine visit. When he arrives at the manor, Pierre, although suspicious, does not dare refuse the examination for fear of appearing suspicious. The doctor carries out a thorough examination and quickly notices that Louise's state of health does not correspond to what it should be, despite the medication she takes. He decides to take blood samples for further analysis, while assuring Pierre that everything seems in order so as not to alarm him. The doctor returns to his office with the samples, and shortly after, he receives the results confirming his suspicions. The drugs had been tampered with, endangering Louise's life. With this evidence in hand, he knows he must act quickly to avoid tragedy. After receiving the results confirming the medication was tampered with, he hatches a plan to protect Louise while keeping Pierre in the dark. The next day, Pierre brings Louise to the retirement home, believing that he will thus be able to seize her property without incident. He leaves his mother under the supervision of the staff, feigning concern for her health, and promises to come see her regularly. As soon as he leaves, he contacts a real estate agent to begin the process of selling the family mansion. However, the doctor took the lead. Just after Pierre leaves, he goes to the retirement home, under the pretext of checking on Louise's state of health. He discreetly informs the staff of the situation and asks them to ensure that Louise only takes the medication he provides them with. The staff, well aware of the emergency, cooperated fully. Meanwhile, Jean arrives in France, determined to save his mother. He immediately goes to the retirement home where he finds his mother weakened, but safe. Louise, recognizing her son, confides in him her fears, although she is still in shock from recent events. Jean, furious with his brother, decides to confront Pierre. But the more cautious doctor dissuades him for the moment, suggesting they first gather additional evidence before taking any direct action. Jean reluctantly agrees, knowing that a mistake could allow Pierre to escape. To strengthen their strategy, Jean and the doctor decide to involve a private detective in order to monitor Pierre in an even more discreet and efficient manner. This detective, renowned for his discretion and expertise, immediately begins to follow Pierre's slightest movements while remaining invisible. Pierre, for his part, still believes himself to be in control of the situation. He contacts several real estate agents and begins negotiations for the sale of the mansion, without realizing that he is being closely monitored. Every call, every meeting, every transaction is carefully documented by the detective. The evidence is accumulating quickly. The detective soon discovers that Pierre also began embezzling funds from their mother's bank account, falsifying documents to make it appear that she had signed a power of attorney in his favor. This revelation further alarms Jean, who understands that his brother will stop at nothing to seize the family inheritance. Meanwhile, the doctor continues to visit Louise at the nursing home, ensuring that her health improves under his supervision. Louise, although fragile, begins to regain some of her vigor, which reassures Jean and strengthens his determination to protect his mother. Jean, after consulting the lawyer, decides to take decisive action. With the evidence collected by the detective, he initiates legal proceedings to obtain guardianship of his mother. This would allow him to block all of Pierre's actions and secure Louise's property. The lawyer, who has already frozen current real estate transactions, quickly files a motion with the court to appoint Jean as legal guardian. Pierre, realizing that his plans are falling apart, begins to panic. He tries to quickly withdraw money from Louise's accounts and even considers leaving the country. However, the detective, still on his trail, immediately informs Jean and the lawyer of these suspicious movements. In response, they ask the court to freeze all of Louise's bank accounts, preventing Pierre from withdrawing one more cent. The situation reaches its climax when Pierre, desperate, decides to confront Jean. He goes to the nursing home and attempts to force a confrontation with his mother, hoping to manipulate her one last time to get what he wants. However, Jean and the doctor are already there, having anticipated that Pierre would attempt such a coup. When Pierre arrives, he finds Jean and the doctor next to Louise, who is now aware of her son's actions. Pierre, taken by surprise, tries to play the worry card, but his mask quickly falls when he realizes that he has been discovered. Louise, despite her weakness, finds the strength to ask him why he wanted to betray her like this. Faced with his own mother's accusation, Pierre loses his calm and involuntarily reveals his true intentions, thus confirming all suspicions. Jean, with a heavy but determined heart, then calls in the authorities. Pierre is immediately arrested for fraud, attempted theft, and mistreatment of a vulnerable person. The evidence accumulated by the detective and the testimonies of the doctor and Madame Dupuis seal his fate. After Pierre's arrest, Jean feels a mixture of relief and sadness. Although he managed to protect his mother and put an end to his brother's schemes, Pierre's betrayal left an indelible mark on him. With the determination to no longer leave his mother alone during this difficult period, Jean decides to bring Louise back to the family manor, where she can find a familiar and soothing environment. When they arrive at the mansion, Louise is overcome with emotion. Although weak, she is happy to return to the house where she spent so many years. Jean installs him comfortably in his room, taking care to recreate a warm and welcoming atmosphere. He calls on home nurses to watch over her constantly, ensuring that she will receive the necessary care. Jean spends a lot of time with his mother, discussing memories of the past at length. He avoids talking about Pierre so as not to disturb her further, preferring to concentrate on lighter subjects that could comfort her. Louise, although still fragile, seems to be gradually recharging her batteries thanks to the presence of her son. Meanwhile, Jean's lawyer continues to handle the legal aspects of the case. Thanks to guardianship, Jean can now legitimately manage his mother's property. He also undertook to restore certain parts of the manor, in order to restore it and preserve its heritage. A year after Pierre's arrest, Jean and Louise welcome their close friends, including Madame Dupuis and the doctor, for a small ceremony at the manor. They decide to mark this moment as a new beginning, a celebration of life and family. Jean, holding his mother's hand, raises a glass in honor of those who helped them get through this ordeal. The mansion, lit by the evening lights, seems more alive than ever. Jean knows he made the right decision in protecting his inheritance and looking out for his mother. They survived the storm, and now they can finally enjoy the peaceful days ahead, surrounded by the love and support of their most loyal friends.